We're going to wrap up some of the details about treasuries in this module, and I'm going to cover some of the things that we covered in the class before and also in some of the previous modules. Much of the material that you've seen in this module you've seen before and it's reviewed, but because treasuries are such an important security, bond security in our in the market, we're just going to summarize these items again. First off, treasuries are viewed as having very low or no default risk. And again, that's sort of ironic given the discussions that we've had here recently about raising the debt limit and not being able to make our U.S. Treasuries payment. But overall, U.S. Treasuries are backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, and again, very low default risk. What securities are generally recognized as or thought of as is a zero risk investment. There's no default risk, and so it will be the lowest yield or the lowest interest rate on the securities that are out there, and other securities such as corporate bonds, municipal bonds, where there is default risk, will have higher yields to maturity than U.S. Treasuries. Because of the size of the debt of the U.S. government, there is a large volume of U.S. Treasuries that exist out there, and there's a large volume of trades, and it's a very liquid market. If you look at the quotes on Bloomberg or Wall Street Journal or whatever, those trades will be up to the minute, second actually. So this is a very liquid market. And again, if you got into treasuries, you could get out of those treasuries very easily. Here are the types of treasuries that exist out there, and we've did a lot of discussing already on bills, notes, and bonds. Bills less than 1 year maturity, notes 1 to 10 year maturity, treasury bonds 10 or more. Then we also have TIPS or Treasury Inflation Protection in securities, strip treasury securities, and agent securities, and I'm going to talk about those last three in this module, or spend some time on those last three. Again, bills, notes, and bonds, we've been over the basic specification of those a number of times in this class, and now we're going to go into the TIPS, strips we've talked about, but again, I'm going to give a bit more detail on this one, and also agency securities. Again, some just basic definitions. Par is the value at the end of the life of the treasury, so that's what you'll get back, and it's also the amount on which interest will be determined. So the par value, and I often use 1,000 or 100, just to keep calculation simple. That's the value you get in the end, and the value in which interest or coupon payments will be determined. There's also a coupon rate, and that's used to determine the interest payments, or what we often call the coupon payments. Treasury bills, notes and bonds are covered on this slide, but treasury bills are zero coupon. They have one payment at the end. They're also known as discount bonds. You get $1,000 par at the end. You pay money up front for that bond. Again, there's one payment at the end. Common lengths of these bonds are 1, 3, 6, 9, and 12 months. Treasury notes and bonds are, again, over a year length and maturity. They make semi-annual coupon payments, so there's a coupon payment at the end of every semi-annual period. Coupon rate is stated on a yearly basis. We divide that rate by 2 to come up with the coupon payment. So in our example there, if we have $1,000 par, 3% coupon rate, our semi-annual payments are $15. TIPS are the next treasury that we want to talk about. And TIPS, as you can see here, are Treasury Inflation Protection Securities, TIPS. These are meant as an inflation hedge, and the way these bonds, bills work, or bonds and notes work, is that think of it as exactly the same as any other bond or note. It makes semi-annual payments. It has a stated coupon rate. However, the principal at the end of the note is going to be inflation adjusted. Also, each one of the coupon rates during the year are going to be inflation adjusted. And the process for doing that are going to be shown on the next several slides. I'm going to give an example here, and this is a real example, but what we're going to do is calculate the interest payment for the following bond. It has $1,000 par. It's a 30-year TIPS security with a 3.58% coupon rate. It was originally issued on April 15th, and we're going to calculate the interest payment on October 15th. As I said on the previous slide, what we do is adjust the par for changes in interest rate. And here you see at the bottom there a TIPS index ratio, which you can find on a website that's listed there. But the index ratio is 1.44505. I'm going to describe the calculation of that 1.44505 on the next slide. But what we're going to do when we calculate the coupon payment is take the 1.445 times our $1,000 par and say our par is now $1,445. Let me show you that, but first let's look at how that index ratio is calculated. The index ratio is based on the Consumer Price Index. The CPI is a measure of inflation. As the CPI goes up, we've had inflation, so if we have a 2% inflation rate over the next year, our CPI would go up for 2%. If we had deflation, obviously it would go down as well. But it's a measure of inflation. It's a measure of how all price levels have increased over time. The way it's used, CPI is used in the TIPS calculation, is the CPI is found at the issuance of the bond. And in this case, the CPI for this bond was 161.74, and that's on April 15th, 1998. So on that April 15th day when this bond was issued, the CPI, as reported by the federal government, was 161.74. The CPI in October 15th is 233.72290. So we go find the CPI in the month of the payment, and again, that in this example is 233.7229, and we calculate the index. And here the index is, as you can see, the CPI in the month of the payment divided by the CPI in the month of the issuance, so we get 1.44505. Here the interpretation is that money is 44% worth less than today, or it would take 44% more money to buy the same goods in 2013 as it did in 1998. So what we're going to do, because of that inflation that has occurred, is adjust that inflation payment up by 44%, 1.445. Continuing my example, on October 15th, 2013, we can then calculate the payment. We have a par of 1,000. We multiply it by that index ratio, 1.44505. Get our new par for this calculation of 1445.05, and can calculate the coupon payment, which in this example is $26.19. So as we go through time, inflation happens, our payments are going to go up. The TIPS yield, or yield to maturity on TIPS, will differ from normal Treasury notes. And here's an example on October 22nd, 2013. 5-year note is a 0.1 yield. Our TIPS yield is minus 0.68%. It's negative It's based on the scheduled payments. So when we calculate those yield to maturities, it does not consider changes in the prince or the coupon and par values. If you look at the difference there, that is the premium for inflation, and it's generally viewed as your expectation for the inflation rate. 0.78% over the next 5 years, 1.61% over the next 10 years, and 2.29 over the next 30 years. Relatively low payments. If you believe that inflation is going to average higher than that, you would make more than that yield by buying a TIPS bond. Conversely, if you believe it's less than that, you would make less than those yields on those TIP bond. We've talked a bit about strip treasury securities. I'm going to give it more detail here in the next several slides. These were started in 1982, so they've been around a while. But what they do again is strip the coupon payment series from the principal payment part of it. The reason why we do this is for reinvestment risk. So with these strips, an individual can really tailor the timing of the payments to the actual desires. And let me give you an example of what reinvestment risk would be. If we buy a 2-year Treasury note, we will have those intermediate coupon payments. We will not get the yield to maturity on those coupon payments if we don't reinvest those at the yield to maturity. So there is a risk there that we cannot reinvest those coupon payments at the yield to maturity. So that's our reinvestment risk, and if we want to avoid that, and we know in particular when we want those payments to be, we would buy Treasury strips. Alright, so we have Treasury strips, and we have two types. We have the coupon and the principal. The coupon is the coupon payments, and the principals is the principal strips. Here's an example of a strip, and here in this slide we begin with just a normal Treasury note. It's a 4% coupon rate, $1,000 par. It's going to make 8 semi-annual payments. You see the payments listed on the table there. The coupon payment in each period would be $20, and at the end of the eighth, or in the 8th period, we will get $20 plus our $1,000 par back. So that's our normal Treasury note, and now we're going to create our strips from that, and we're going to create a coupon strip and a principal strip. Here's what those strips would look like, and we have two here, a coupon strip, and a coupon strip would be each one of the coupon payments. So if you bought that security, you would get 8 semi-annual payments of $20 a piece, and then you would have a principal strip, which would be the $1,000 at the end of the 8th semi-annual period, or in 2 years. You'll note that that principal strip is a zero coupon bond. As we discussed in class, the yield to maturity will equal the yield to maturity will be based on 1, and it will equal the spot rate because there's only one payment involved. Coupon strips, again, you see that there's 8 period payments. You can actually break up those coupon strips by period as well, so you could in essence create zero coupon bonds out of the coupon strips if you so desired, or you couldn't, but some financial organization could do that. The above, Treasury bills, notes, bonds, TIPS, and strips were based solely on U.S. Treasuries. There are also quote-unquote agency bonds, and those agency bonds are very much like Treasuries in that they have very low default risk. They have a little bit more than Treasuries, but very low because they are backed by quote-unquote the full faith of the federal government. But there's some GSEs, government-sponsored entities that are privately owned but are publicly chartered. And I'm going to talk through a couple of those examples here, but if you buy a GSE bond, it generally has the full faith of the federal government, but is not. It differs slightly from a treasury in that it's a GSE. Some of those GSEs include the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is a power system in the United States, primarily in the southern U.S. Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae was created by the federal government for mortgage-backed securities. You might recall in the 2008, this Fannie Mae organization did blow up, and it turns out that their agency bonds were backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. Freddie Mac is another mortgage-backed securities organization. It had the same issues as Fannie Mae. We also have here two GSEs related to agriculture. Farm Credit System, First Farm Credit in Illinois and Farm Credit System of Illinois, both in Illinois. Two associations would have received their funding from Farm Credit System bonds. Again, those are GSE organizations, so they would be backed by the full faith and credit of the federal government. And then we also have the Federal Agricultural Mortgage Corporation, which offers Farmer Mac, which offers agriculture mortgage-based securities. So there are two GSEs here specifically related to agriculture, Farm Credit, and Federal Agriculture Mortgage Corporation. Here again is a list of treasuries. We talked about all of these. They generally have very low default risk or no default risk, and low yield to maturities compared to those bonds that do have default risk.